Hello. Good morning, everybody. How are you all today? Would you all like to say hello?
Hi. Yeah, hi. And I hope you all like history. Do you all like history? There's somebody saying no very strongly from the first row. So let's hope you change your views by the end of the session.
Yeah, but this is a fun kind of history. It's all about stories. It's not only history, right? Okay. Uh, Three of us have written books that are part of a series called Songs of Freedom. What do you think the series is about? Anybody? Songs of Freedom? Raise your hand if you get a sense. Yeah, you. Yes. About the freedom movement. Absolutely. This is a series about the freedom movement written from the point of view of children like you all from different parts of the country. And I'm going to, move over to my colleagues here who are going to tell you about their book. Would you like to start, Lesley?
So my book is A Conspiracy in Calcutta. So it's your city, and it's set in the city of Calcutta, which was a nerve center of the freedom movement. Most of you must have family members who took part in the freedom movement. So their stories you must have heard from them at the dining table. And the freedom movement wasn't only about the great leaders we read about in history books. Each one of you, your family members, the whole country took part in it. So my book is about a little girl whose family too took part in the freedom movement. And like you might also come to know that what kind of life a child lived at that time. Devika. So my book is called The Train to Tanjore. Does anybody here know what Tanjore is or where it is? No, that's not Tangiers. Tanjore, Tanjore, yes. South India, exactly. It's in Tamil Nadu. It's called Tanjavur, but the other name is Tanjore. So this is set in Tamil Nadu, in Tanjore, during the Quit India movement of 1942. And it's about this young boy who is trying to deal with what is happening around him in terms of the Quit India movement protests, as well as his own personal struggles.
Thank you. My book is called The Chopati Cooking Club. I thought I should show you guys here. You all seem to be out of it a little bit. Uh, it's set in anybody has any clue as to where Chopati could be? Yes. Mumbai, that's right. It's set in Mumbai. And you know what? Mumbai in 1942 was an amazing place. Gosh, there was so much happening there. It was the hotbed of the Quit India movement. Very close to my house, there's a place called Azad Maidan. No, this is Agast Kranti Maidan. And over there, Gandhiji held this huge big meetings. And all the leaders of the freedom struggle were there. And it was there that Gandhiji announced and he said, quit India. He told the British, leave us now. And he told everybody out there, we have to work towards the freedom struggle and we have to do whatever it takes. Have you all heard of this slogan? Do or die? Karenge ya marenge? So that was the kind of place Mumbai was when my story started. And I have these three young people like all of you who are very excited to hear about the freedom struggle. They're like, what's going on? So there's this little girl called Sakina, and she has a friend called Mehul and another friend called Zenobia. And all three of them are like, what is this freedom business? We want to be part of it. But honestly, they have no idea what the freedom struggle is about, but they're just infected by the energy and want to be part of it. And as they try and find out how they can be part of the freedom struggle, some very interesting things start to happen. They come across a spy who's trying to sabotage something. they come across a secret radio that is being run by somebody, and the British is after that person. And Sakina, Mehul, and Zenobia find that they are part of this thing, even though they don't know it. So that's what my book is about. So I just, as you might know, we just celebrated 75 years of independence. Um, I think this was an important time to remember our independence movement. But Lesley, tell me, why do you think it was important for children to read a series like this?
See, we all love history and we all should know about our past, even not like we see through the textbook, which we have to just memorize about a few people or few events. We want to actually understand how was it to live in that era. And this book, being from the perspective of a child, give us that opportunity to write about what children went through. See, it was a time when there was a lot going on, and for a child, a 10-year-old girl who's in my book, for her to grasp what's happening around her, it was very difficult. But at the same time, she was seeing all these leaders. At that time, they were like neighbors to her, or they were still, they hadn't become the larger-than-life figures. And she was seeing them and trying to understand that what she could also do when they called upon the Satyagraha movement or they wanted the people to join. So as a child, taking part in a movement like that, it was interesting for them. And we, as y'all are children today, y'all might sometimes think that these movements or a cause you are passionate about, you might still wonder whether you can be a part of it, because it might feel very large or too large for you when all the grown-ups are taking part. So what role could you play? You might wonder about that. But when we write about these books from the perspective of a child, and children, when you read, I hope that you also know that you are not small or insignificant. And you can also contribute to something much larger and be a part of it. So I was hoping that as we read more books about children during the freedom movement, our children of today will also get a chance to think that they have power and even take part in movements or any change that is passionate to them. So that is the reason I think writing these books are relevant even in today's age, and for children to read it, it's important that everyone took part together. And if you want to do something, you can always join something and be a part of it. And even you will have the power in your hand to make a change. Because children do have a lot of power and they can play a role in whatever thing they want to, if they desire. So that's why I think these books are important even today. Devika.
I think this series is important for two reasons. Apart from being a writer, I'm also a historian. And I know, having done so many sessions with children your age, that the history you read is basically from your textbooks that are not always very interesting or exciting, which is why when I asked the question in the beginning, do you like history, there was some very clear no's. And you find history boring. And basically you read the freedom struggle as a series of facts that you have to learn in order to get marks in your tests. And in order to answer questions in class. And for you, it is just possibly a string of names, a string of facts, a string of dates, and you have no real connection with that. So you know that this was something huge that happened, and you're living in an independent country now, and you know that somebody fought to make that country independent for you, but you're not very sure exactly what went into it, and and even if you know what went into it, it's like you're learning about it from very far away, in time and distance. And so I think a series like this that has protagonists who are your age. This book is a 10-year-old boy who is caught in a series of events that happen around him in Tanjore in the south, that make him wonder who is this Mahatma Gandhi? What is going on around us? What are all these underground activities that are happening that are making the police arrest people, questioning the world around him as he grows. When you read a story like that, then you immediately identify it, with the character, because that person is suddenly almost like you. He has the same problems in school. He has the same problems with his parents and adult figures in his life. He has the same questions about his future that you do. So these names that you read about are actually not so very different from you. They're not just a string of names. These are real people who once thought and acted like you. So when you read about, and all the books in this series have protagonists your age who are very like you. So that's a strong identification there. So I think that brings you very close to the freedom movement and what actually went on. And the other reason why I think this series is important is pretty much what Lesley said, and what Lubaina said earlier. This is an important series because it tells you that each of you are very important in your own way. All of you can influence things that happen around you in very positive ways if you just think about it. All of you have the courage and the intelligence within you to make good decisions, right decisions, and something that impacts the society around you, which is exactly what all these figures in these books are doing. And it just tells you that you've inherited an independent nation, but there's something that you have to do to keep it moving in that same positive direction. So what is it that you as an individual can do?
Yes, I relate to both of them. I wrote this book for two reasons also. Do you all remember the pandemic? Everybody was making Dalgona coffee and, doing arts and crafts and stuff at home, and it was kind of depressing sometimes. Well, during that time, my dad got really ill. So I used to go through the lockdown to meet him, and it was pretty weird and scary, and I used to spend a lot of time with him. And in order to, make it more sort of, nicer for him, I used to tell him, "Oh, Dad, tell me about your childhood, Tell me about your life growing up. Tell me about, were you there during the time of the freedom struggle?" And I wrote down everything. So, guys, you all want to listen as well? This lot? And when he was telling me all these stories, something I realized? I realized that history is all about people. It's about you. It's about what you do every day. You're a piece of history. Supposing I say, okay, so that young woman was playing, Nintendo. Which era would she be from? Would she be from the 18th century, 19th century, 21st century? Yeah, the 21st century, right? 20th century, possibly. Supposing you said, okay, that person was wearing a tight churidar kurta and singing Shammi Kapoor songs. Which era would that person be from? From the 1960s, maybe? 1960s, yeah. Supposing you say that person was watching, Shah Rukh Khan movies. Which era? 21st century, that's right. So everything that you do, that you read, that the jobs you do, the clothes you wear, the way you spend time with your friends, this is all history. History is about people. And I wanted to write this story down of people who were part of the freedom movement. And at that point, the freedom movement became real to me. It was not just a set of dates that was 1930 Simon Commission or whatever. Sorry, Devika, oh God, she's going to kill me because she's got her history totally down pat. But I know something happened in 1930. Satyagraha movement and civil disobedience movement. Thank you very much. So, see, I don't remember. But it was not the dates as much as the people and the sacrifices the people made. What did they make the sacrifices for? What does freedom mean? The freedom means that we were free of a power that was controlling us and not letting us fulfill our destiny. You are the inheritors of a free country, which means every one of you has a voice in a democracy. And that for me was an amazing thing, to see the transformation of a nation to from where a few people make a decision to where the entire country makes a decision. So that was one of the main reasons why I wrote this book, basically. And also I loved my three protagonists. Somewhere along the way I started writing them and I'm like, oh, I really like them. I hope they have a lot of fun solving the mystery and things like that. It happens when you write a book. You just love your characters. So I wanted to tell their story to you all. So that was one of the reasons. Yeah. Lesley, your protagonist, Piti, tell us about her. And she was a very interesting character, very strong, you know.
Strong-willed girl.
Yeah.
Yes. So my protagonist, Biti, she's a 10-year-old girl. And when writing about her, I didn't only want to capture the essence of that time or the backdrop, which was the political freedom. For young girls at that time, there were many other things that concerned them, apart from their parents or the grown-ups fighting a political freedom battle. So like, she basically wanted to go to school, and there were objections on that. She was in contact with people who were getting their daughters married at the age of 10, 11. So she couldn't understand that when people are fighting for freedom, why isn't a child or a girl given that freedom of choice whether she wants to be married at that age or not? So these questions came up in my mind, and I thought that it can't be fair to write a book on the freedom struggle if we are not going to speak about our individual freedoms or what a child wanted to do. So if I ask y'all, what do you want to do? Y'all might say, oh, I don't want to sit here just now, I want to go and play somewhere. So freedom to everyone means something different. Someone might want to do something that their parents do not allow them to. And that time, there were so many social evils that would discriminate against a girl. So my character, I wanted to bring about all these interesting facts and put her in a challenging situation where she could try and figure out how to deal with these kind of conditions. Because it's not only her, even now, many of you would experience some kind of restrictions which you would wish that you all were free to do. So that was one objective. And the other thing that struck me when I was writing is that in that era, the education for girls wasn't very easy for them to access. So it was a struggle for them to basically go to school. While we see education as learning and the opportunity to go to school, it meant a lot more for a girl. It meant like she would have a voice, she could take decisions of her own, and even she would have the chance to dream of something that was not thrust upon her by her parents or the grown-ups or society basically as a whole. So the girl would be the best role in this kind of social setup. So that is why I decided to have my protagonist as a 10-year-old girl who could challenge all these situations and find herself in this and seek answers. And I hope so that when you'll read the book and you'll find that if y'all are in a challenging situation or up against a wall or something that y'all do not understand, y'all too can figure out that there are ways around it. And Biti, she wanted to make history. Now, she really wanted to do something, but there were people in her family who dismissed it and thought that a girl trying to make history, that was a joke. So does she go about, and can a girl in that era, can she go against all the odds that are up against her and do something and also be a part of the freedom struggle and her own personal dreams or her desires, whether she manages to bring that across and put it forward to the adults, and will they understand it? Because see, now the communication between you and your parents is much different as to then when children and the parents, they were not so freely, communication wasn't there between them. So who would these children go to and speak about their dreams? Or when they were in a difficult situation, who could they speak to? So all this came to my mind, and I thought a girl in this situation was the best character. So that's how Biti came about.
I just want to ask a quick question about this. Although your character is a fictional character, Dr. Devika has been writing about women in history for a long time. Do you feel the need to write more about women who have participated in historical movements or have been significant history figures in their own right? What would you say to that?
Absolutely, because as a historian, the first thing that strikes you is that the history that you read is basically his story. It has very little to do with the women in the past. And this is not just true of the freedom struggle, but it is true of any period of the past that you take up. In fact, it is possibly easier to write about women in the time of the freedom struggle because there's a lot of evidence, there's a lot of sources, there's a lot of documentation that you can consult. But the further back in time you go, the less you know, the less are your sources. So it's like a big black hole in history, and nobody really thinks it's worthwhile to talk about these women. So there might be a couple of women who pop up, like Rani Lakshmibai, or one or two names that are always repeated, the same names. But whenever there is any other evidence for any other woman coming up, the usual trend is to say, oh, let's ignore this person, let's make this person invisible, let's focus on the men. Which is why, I don't know if you're familiar with my other books, but I've written a series, the Queen series, which is basically on very remarkable women in the past who actually ruled, but who have been removed from history, and you never read about them. But having said that, I mean, so that's why it is important to know about, okay, so Lubaina wants me to tell you the titles. There's Queen of Ice, which is the story of Didda, who ruled Kashmir in the 10th century for around 50 years. You will not really read much about her in normal histories, but she's an extremely remarkable woman. Then you have Queen of Earth, which deals with Prithvi Mahadevi, who ruled Orissa in the 9th century. Again, somebody who's not known at all. Then in Queen of Fire, it's about Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi, a very well-known figure. But in most accounts of her, you read about her as a larger-than-life superwoman, you know, who could never do any wrong, who was like a goddess almost. And in this book, I've actually gone into her inner life, her mind, her worries, her relationship with her adopted son. She'd adopted a child at some point. And, you know, what was she like as a mother? Was she actually scared of the British, while she went to battle with them? So it's that kind of looking at it from a different perspective. And it's very, very important, I think, to include women, in history who have made huge contributions that we do not know about. And in that sense, both Lubaina's book and Lesley's book are loosely based around real women characters who existed at the time of the freedom struggle, who actually did really remarkable things to push the movement forward towards independence, and they don't really know about these women. Now, having said that, I did a very unusual thing with my book. Normally, I write about women, and in Train to Tanjore, the protagonist is a 10-year-old boy. I decided to take that up as a challenge, and it's about this boy who's growing up in a household that doesn't have too much money, but he has dreams. He wants to study. He wants to do something with his life. But, his personal life is restricted by a huge adult figure who's basically his father's older brother. Now, I'm not sure what you call a father's older brother in Bangla. J2. In Tamil, in the south, we call him Peri Appa. Appa means father, Peri means big, so big father. And so this big father, Peripa, is the controlling figure in his life, and he does not want this hero of mine, Thambi is his name, to move forward, to study, to make something of his life. So this book is about his personal struggle with his family in order to fulfill his dreams, set in the larger context of a country that is pushing for larger freedoms, for, making something of their dream to rule themselves?
My main character is little Sakina. I haven't given her an age. She's in the 5th standard, basically. She's like all the young people over here. She just basically likes to go to school. She has lots of fun with her friends, Zenobia. They love, watching movies. They love, in Mumbai, in December, we get strawberries. So they'll crush the strawberries and put lipstick on themselves. And, they go play in the waves and things like that. But like all of you, somewhere deep inside, there's this feeling that I can do more. I resonate with something. Maybe you feel strongly about something. Maybe you feel strongly about saving plastic, or the oceans. Or maybe you feel you want to do something about global warming. Or maybe you want to do something about poverty. I don't know. There's something that everybody might feel they want to be part of. And this little child suddenly gets a sense that I want to be part of this great movement. That's the freedom struggle. And she and her 2 friends, and a lot of the book is about how they keep trying to find ways to form, the freedom struggle. What I loved about writing Sakina was how different she was from the beginning to the end of the book. Because in the beginning it was, I want to do something. I don't know what, but I want to do it. But by the end of it, she realizes that it's not so simple. But even understanding the magnitude of what is going on is a big internal change, which will drive her to actually do something significant subsequently, basically. So that was Sakina's journey for me. And inseparable from her 2 friends, because, they do everything together, they learn everything together. So it's more of a little, Enid Blyton hangover that I have of 3 friends, doing things and eating a lot of food, basically. So yeah, there's not a book of mine that's without food, basically. So yeah. So actually, that's another thing. I noticed your book had a lot of food too. Do you guys like reading books that have food in them? Yes, yes. Mine had a lot. Hers had a lot. Hers had not much. But so why did you include? Oh my God, I was salivating when I was reading your book.
So, 2 reasons again. One, which is the simpler reason, is that I decided to just put in my favorite foods into the book, so that it was just a lot of fun, like just putting that in between when I wanted to kind of show Thambi basically enjoying his life in little bits.
His birthdays, I love
his
those
birthday.
descriptions. Yeah,
it's basically what I eat on my birthday. So I made him eat what he ate on his birthday. But the second more important reason is that because I set this story in the South, I don't think too many people have too much of an idea about what goes on in the South. Because the history that you read is basically North-centric. It is all about the North. It is very little to do, in fact, with the East, where you are, or the South, or even the West. And so because I was setting it in the South, in a period that's not really well known, I mean, I think you read the freedom struggle only from the point of view of the North. And actually, the experience of the freedom struggle in the South was quite different from the North. They had other worries. They were worried about the Japanese, for instance. So there's a lot of other issues that came in. But because I wanted to give a flavor of the place, I decided to include a lot of sambar and idli and, things
that's
that
the least of it. There were lots more fun stuff.
Yeah. So that is why I included a lot of food in it.
In fact, a lot of interesting different aspects of the freedom struggle. Like, sorry, I'm jumping in here, but Beatty is involved in, sort of, you talked about the lathi and dagger, and normally we think of this as a non-violent movement, basically. So would you like to share that how much physical training happened in the freedom struggle and how it sort of, was used, basically?
So at that time when I was researching for the book, I came to know about the women who wanted to be part of it, but they weren't accepted very easily into the folds of these organizations. Now, even the first woman martyr of West Bengal. She was Preeti Lata Vadedra. When she wanted to join Surya Sen's organization, they were like, no, we don't want women in it, because they considered it the male duty to protect women. And they thought that when women, if they are part of it, if they get arrested, they might just break and give away everything about the organization. So they didn't want women in, but we go on to see that later on, because of being a woman, she was allowed in. That is because they thought that nobody would suspect her when she would transport their weapons. So that was the role. Women were only given secondary roles. It was either in propaganda or sheltering the absconding revolutionaries or carrying coded messages around. But women didn't want to just do that, so they wanted to be at the forefront, but without any physical strength. That was impossible. They had the mental strength. They wanted to sacrifice themselves, but they needed some physical strength as well. And these akhadas and the samitis came up at a local level, in which the girls, whoever wanted to join, the students, they were given a kind of physical training. That physical training involved teaching them in lathi play, sword fighting, dagger fighting, cycling, even swimming. So that they got this overall strength that they could use when they were at the forefront. Because women were at that time really pushing to be at the forefront. They were like fed up of just doing the secondary roles. They knew that they were more capable of just being a part of the home members. So when I researched and I came to know that so many girls were involved in this lathi play, and they were training centers at the local levels where people, even the men from the male organizations, they would come and they would teach them about this lathi play, dagger fighting, so that they became confident of themselves. And that's why I included this in the book also, because whereas this training was being imparted, there were also secret centers to recruit the students or the members who wanted to take part in the revolutionary movement. So this served as two purposes. So that's how it came about, to include something like this physical training, and which is very important for self-defense also. And that time, we don't imagine that girls even were given the permission to do all this, but they were doing it. So that was something refreshing to read about, and I thought I must include it.
Yeah, it was quite action-packed. Loved it. Devika, did you come across any interesting things when you researched that you wanted to put into the book?
There were lots of interesting things that I came across. If I may anticipate things a little, Lubaina, here. This story is actually my father's story. It's based on his life. And I have grown up hearing tales of what he did during the Quit India movement, because he actually did something that in his school that might have got him into trouble, which is there in the book. Yes, I'm not going to tell you. This is a spoiler. So in case you're reading the book, you'll figure out. But he does something as his contribution to the Quit India movement. And he basically had to run home and hide from the police for many days at home. So basically, I've grown up hearing this story. And so when I was asked to write a book for this series, of course, my mind turned immediately to women, as I normally do when I choose themes to write on. And then I decided, no, why not write my father's story? And which is what I did. So I talked to him extensively about what was going on around that time, the society, and caste actually played a huge role in a lot of issues that were going on, which he had to deal with. And, there were lots of caste rules and so on and so forth. And, the women, he was treated very differently from his sister, for example. He wanted to study, although the elders did not particularly want him to study, but his sister was supposed to just get married. So there were very clear, gender divisions right there. There was one interesting fact that I'll share with you, which is there in the book, which might sound very strange to you, but that's exactly what happened. you know, when you get your daily newspaper, you sit down with it, or your parents sit down with it, and then read it through, say at the breakfast table or whatever. In those times, if you could not afford to get a newspaper to your house, the newspaper actually used to come to the library, where it would be divided up into its separate sheets, and each sheet would be draped over a separate stand. So there were these stands all over the library, like racks, different pages on different racks. And so you had to go from one rack to the other reading the news, and there might be other people standing at the racks reading before you, so you had to wait in line. And also, if you know, the newspaper's numbered in a certain way that you might be first reading page 1 and then you could be reading page 20, you know, in the sequence in which it's displayed in the rack. But that was the way they actually got their news about the British, about Germany, about the war effort, about Japan. And when he describes it to me, that was his daily ritual. He said, so I used to go to the library to read the newspaper, and my father used to go and listen to the BBC bulletin in secret in somebody's house. Then we'd come home and we'd exchange news about what was happening in the world. So this might seem really weird to you today because, you know, you all have your mobiles and you're sitting around and you got your information in your fingertips, but that was actually a very real part of life not so long ago. So these little interesting snippets, I had to leave out a lot, unfortunately, because, you know, there's a word limit for this book, so I have a huge number of facts, so maybe I will convert that into another book. Let's see.
So censorship of the news was a big deal, you know.
So, Lubaina, can I ask you one question?
Sure.
On that? So, your book, you talk about the secret Congress radio, which is a very interesting thing, again, about the news and the censorship. So can you tell us something about how did you get that idea?
So I don't know if anybody knows a hobby called amateur radio. It's called ham radio, where, you know, people can build their little radio sets and talk to each other all over the world. My brother was an avid ham radio, and he was my older brother. So I was one little, you know, whatever my brother did, I wanted to do. It was like, oh, Bhai is doing this, I'll do this. So I was hopeless at electronics. I had no idea. But I learned Morse code and I got a license. But while he went on to, like, you know, do rescue missions and all with the ham radio, I sat and read up about ham radio because that's the only thing I can do with my life is to read. So I read, and then I found this story about this lady called Usha Mehta. And she was really cool, you know. At a time when radio was a new technology, she started to find people, and she was amazing because she decided that when all the leaders of the freedom movement got arrested during the Quit India movement, there was no news about the freedom struggle or about the leaders of the movement in any of the mainstream media. So it was important for the country to know, from north to south to east to west, that it may not be in the newspapers, but there is an underground movement going on. There are people who believe in the freedom struggle. We have to let each other know. There was no internet, there was no email, there was no Snapchat, there was no Instagram. You had no idea what was going on. So what this lady did was, she got a hold of somebody to finance her. She got this ham radio person who had the secret, you know, all the electronic parts, put together a radio, and actually for almost 3 months, ran it from secret locations. You know, and I've explained that in the book, how they used to have to keep running from place to place because they would stay in one place and transmit. In a little while, the police would be able to trace them. So next day, they would just up and leave and put it and go. So I found Usha Mehta's story extremely inspiring. Not just hers, you know, the thing that, it's a simple thing, but for me, the thing that I took back with me was how brave people were. A simple act of defiance takes a lot of courage. You know, to stand up to a power and say, boss, you are giving me wrong news, I'm not accepting it. That is hard. So I was really inspired by these people, and I wanted to tell their story, basically.
Let me ask you a question, Lubaina, because in your book, there's... yeah, I speak with my hands. In your book, yes, this is about Usha Mehta loosely, but there's so many powerful women who power your book. Yeah. And so was that a conscious decision that you would have these, you know, really, really tough women at every stage? Or this just something that happened as you wrote?
I think that I've been surrounded by women who are understated but really strong. They are in roles that are traditionally women's roles, you know. They are in their kitchens and their homes and their families. Doesn't make them any less strong. And their contribution is always taken for granted, you know. For example, I'm like, you know, hey, I need a salary, I'm a housewife, you know. It's as simple as that. I do as much work as anybody else. So why not tell the story of women in the roles that they do really well, but are not acknowledged? So sorry, that was a bit, but still, that was my sort of idea. Okay, do you all want to ask any questions about each other? To
Yeah, so Lesley, I was just curious about one thing. So if you read Lesley's book, you'll find that there's a lot of what could be termed as slightly disturbing or uncomfortable realistic moments. You have BT, her protagonist, throwing up on the side of a road because she sees a very bloody wound. You have, I hope I'm not giving away spoilers here, but there is this old woman who literally is coughing to death in a prison, but the prison wardens don't care. So normally when we write for your age, we always have these filters in our mind, or we're supposed to have these filters in our mind that, you know, oh my God, children won't be able to deal with this. I personally have a very different opinion. I think that, you know, if you read, you're intelligent enough to figure out what is there in a book and not get totally traumatized by what's happening. But there are a lot of adults who feel that you shouldn't be reading that. So I was just wondering, Lesley, whether that was at the back of your mind in any way. Were you nervous about depicting this, or did you feel it was an essential part of the story, so you had to show it as it was?
Yeah, I thought that it was essential because although we want to shield our children from these harsh realities, it keeps happening around us. And during the freedom struggle, it was even more so prominent. There were families in which the brothers, the fathers, even the mothers were being hung. And so, how are you going to shield a child from that reality? Maybe you will not speak to the child about it, but the emotion the child is facing, that emotion the child has to deal with. So, what was going on at that time around the children, the whole environment was a very violent sort of kind of environment in which they were seeing their brothers, sisters, parents, and family members being ill-treated, even beaten up. Now imagine a child is going to a non-violent protest, one of Gandhiji's protests, but suddenly the colonial police descend upon them and they lathi charge them. So they are trying to grasp that what did they do wrong, or what was it that led to something like this. So these things continued happening, even as you speak about Biti throwing up. That too, she didn't expect something like that, but it just happened in front of her, and that was her reaction. So children of your age or younger than y'all, they really don't know how to deal with this, but they experience it all the time. So we have to understand that children do see these things, and by not talking about them, we are not shielding it from them. But by speaking about it, they might get a chance to also express what their fears are and deal with it. So instead of shielding the child or not bringing the truth in front of them, I thought let's just keep it real. These things did happen. Children were exposed to those kind of situations. And so I knew that maybe some children might feel that this was not appropriate for them to encounter, but all the same, this was happening. So I just let it be like that.
Thank you. We would like to, you know, share a little bit of our books with you. But before we do that, do you all have any questions for us? Or comments or anything, basically. Tell us what you think about history, about... Always.
Certainly, sir.
Children's authors are children. Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
Same school, but yeah. So thank you, all three. Um, thoroughly love your writing. Thank you specifically for writing these books, because I think what we do uh, in the subject of history in school and what actually happened out there and what actually made history are very different kinds of things. So thank you for writing these lives which were lost, but without which nothing could have happened to make us turn the pages of those history books. I would like to ask, or just sort of raise a point about history as it is being taught today. And I know Dr. Rangachari is trained and the others have done their research and it shows in the books. But how much are we told, and how much should we be told? And how do we teach the school child to approach history in the same spirit as they do the so-called science subjects, in terms of sifting facts and taking things with a pinch of salt and maybe assessing what they need to know? Okay, this is a bit tough because there are a lot of teachers in this audience. There are lots of grown-ups, and I'm not sure whether what I'm going to say will be politically correct or appropriate. Okay, it's like this. The history that you're reading in textbooks is only half the history that actually happened. I've already told you about it from the gender point of view. If some of you are interested in learning more about this, the session following this one will be another one on history, where I'm going to be in conversation with someone who's written this fabulous graphic novel on the Indus Valley civilization. And I'll also be talking about my Queen series. So if you're interested, do stay back for that. But history is also a science. Therefore, you have to approach it like a science as well, which means that you question everything that you are told. You ask yourself whether, is this right? Are we only learning some part of the picture here, or are we being told something that doesn't really fit in with what we do know? So you ask questions, and you read and you read and you read, and then you make up your mind. For those of you, the big crowd that said, we don't like history, all I will say to you is, read stories, historical fiction, read stories about history, which is when you learn not just about India, but all over the world, which is when your mind will open up to a lot of events happening around you, and you will ask even more questions. And then you will go back to your textbooks, or you'll ask your teachers, or I'm sorry for putting you in a spot, teachers, but you will ask them for more information, and it'll become a process of getting to the actual fact. As I said, the further back in time you go, the more difficult it is to get the actual fact. It is slightly more possible the nearer in historical time you get. But yeah, your textbooks could do with a lot of improvement, yes.
Yeah, I just want to add to this why it's nice to read historical fiction. One of the important things that historical fiction does is make you understand that sometimes history does repeat itself, and you can use the past to make sense of the present. Can you do that? I think
Absolutely
I read a lot of historical fiction to, see parallels with what's going on right now, and see that maybe they could have done it differently. Maybe we should do it differently, perhaps. Anybody else? Any other questions from the children? Yes, please. We have a...
The history books I have read is all about civilizations, rivers, and early humans. But the history you told is totally different from what I read about history. So I just wanted to know, have you based this history on yourselves or about the world?
I just want to first of all say whatever insightful thing to say, because we seldom analyze and read the things that have just gone past, which actually impact our lives far more than ancient civilizations or whatever. I mean, that's good to know, but the freedom struggle is actually the reason why a modern sovereign nation was born. And we should probe it and understand it and appreciate it a little more. But there's a larger question this young child has.
It's just that history is all about people. It has always been about people. It will always be about people and the decisions they take, and the paths they evolve to get from one point to the other. And so it is important to learn about civilizations because, again, people built those. People were hugely impacted with that. But it is also important to realize that we are all part of history. 20 years down the line, you will maybe tell somebody much younger than yourself about how life was when you were in school. That is history. So anything that already has happened is history. What is happening now is history. 30 years down the line, you could be telling people, oh, when I was a kid, I actually attended this, whatever, Tata Steel, Kolkata literary meet, where we sat in the sun and we listened to various people talk. That is a part of history. So unfortunately, and again, this is not the fault of the textbook writers, because they have a certain number of facts with a certain number of words, and there's a curriculum, and they have to meet that. So they can't be very exciting as they're going about it. So they're doing the best they can. At least most of them are. So you just need to keep that in mind, that, it's us, it's humans. They have the same worries and the same, ambitions, the same dreams. And then we go on to another age with the same set of, dreams and so on. Lesley, you have anything to add to this?
So I was thinking that that's why you need to read more historical fiction, so that you get an idea of other things that were going on apart from what are the facts in the textbooks, which is all laid out in front of you, and of course what you require to know about your country or the history of the world. There are certain things, but from the people's perspective, if you want to know, you should read more historical fiction, which will give you an idea of actually the emotions and the sentiments of the people and how they reacted to the historical events that happened at that time, the ones that you are reading about.
Any other questions? Yes. Can we take one more?
What inspired you to choose this topic?
Should I go? Okay, so firstly, I wanted to think about a child growing up in that era. And this was a series that was coming about from the publisher. And we had a chance to explore where we were. Since I'm from Calcutta, I decided that I would set my story over here so that children like you, readers, could know that around them, they are living in a place where so many historical events took place. And also, I wanted to include that how children would respond to a situation in which, for example, if someone of the family members was taken up or something by the police. And so that inspired me to think about putting children in that situation and seeing it from the eyes of a child. And also alongside, see, when you are speaking about history or writing about history, it cannot be in isolation. But since all people are part of that history, we must talk about the people and their emotions, their feelings, their lives at that point of time. So all included, I saw what happened around here. Means I had to research for the book. So I read about the history of West Bengal and Bengal at that time. And then it was so inspiring that so many things happened here. It was like the nerve center of the freedom struggle. There were so many movements going on. So that inspired me to set the story in this city, as well as have a character who could bring out this cities and the spirit of this city better.
Okay, I think don't think we have time to read our books. So, yeah. Sorry, we won't have time to read our books. So that's a good thing. Go ahead and get a copy and read it.
Buy the books.
So, hello, can you hear me?
Thank you.
Okay, that was a lovely session, and it was a lot of history. I love history personally, so I've read all your books, and I love it.
Thank you.
So, any of you who would want their books, there is an author signing session at the Mohar Kunj. You can follow the authors there, and you can get your book signed. Okay, and you can buy a copy of your books. In another 5 minutes, we'll start our next session. Next 5 minutes?
Yes, I'll see you at lunch. I'll leave at 1:45. If I see you at 1. Oh,
So we'll start our session in another five